Hey there, welcome conscious fashion friends to Inside Fashion Design's weekly community conversations. This is where you can meet and greet with a fashion industry pro. This is your opportunity not only to hear from the experts and their knowledge and advice, but also to connect with them directly to grow your network and use their learnings to level up and empower you in your own career. For 30 minutes each week, we will have a quick chat, the perfect morning break where you will walk away with some good nuggets of advice, tips and tricks, and two of my all-time favorite things, inspiration and community connection. I love building connections because it strengthens our support system. You grow your community and you grow your support, and we can all succeed together. I am continuously finding amazing people through LinkedIn and referrals, and 99.9% of the time, these folks also love to connect, share their experiences and stories, offer advice, and even more recommendations and suggestions. That's why each week you will find us here chatting with a fashion industry pro. So hop on in, join the conversation, say hello, ask a question, share your own tips, stories, favorite resources, or own piece of advice. Follow me on LinkedIn so you don't miss out. Every single week, we'll be chatting with a fashion industry pro. Are you a fashion industry pro and you want to share your story? Message me and let's talk. Who knows, you could be our next featured guest. Thanks for joining us today. Now, let's dive into today's session. Hello and welcome everyone today. Happy Thursday. Thank you for joining us today. If you are here, you are a curious and a caring, fashion conscious person who is wanting to learn more of what you can do in the world of sustainability and textiles and fashion. And we appreciate your time and you being here with us today. We know we are all striving to do better in our work. And through these sessions, we're hoping to learn from each other and hear from the experts so that we can make strides together and move forward in making a difference in our processes and the planet and people, and making a stronger impact in our work. So welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. I have 3 action steps for you to take. Number 1, introduce yourself in the chat. I'd love to hear where you're from, and if you are working in the fashion industry, tell us what you do. If not, that's okay too. You can mention what you do in your work, and sustainability crosses every sector of the market and industries. So it doesn't matter where you're working or where you're coming from. We're happy you're here, and we'd love to hear more of who you are and where you're coming in from today. And also follow me on LinkedIn, because then you will see each week our featured guests that are coming up and you won't miss out. And we hope you join us for future sessions. We have a great lineup of all different industry pros who are, again, going to share their expertise and knowledge. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you will see what's coming up each week. And we also want you to join in the conversation. Share a question, a comment, your own tips, maybe your own challenge even. If there's something that you're struggling with in the world of sustainability, in processes or in your own work, shoot a little note in the comment and we can try to address it. And we're here to support each other and figure out how we can all use each other's knowledge and resources to help us get through some of those challenges. So please share along the way. You're welcome to also ask questions along the way, and we will address those as we can and as we go through this. And if you are here for the first time, welcome. If you are listening to the replay or watching the video on replay, again, welcome. And you're still able to join in the conversation by connecting with us through LinkedIn, sending in a question, even again, your own tips and tricks and comments based on this topic. So we'd love to still have you part of the conversation, even if you're not with us live today. So today's session is textile sustainability, and we're going to look at the evolution of textile sustainability over the last 15 years and maybe beyond. Some of the actions that you can take to fill the gap between actually knowing what to do and actually doing it, and some examples of people that have done some successful things along the way with their engagement with their businesses and in their work, and we can learn from them. So I'm really happy to introduce today's guest. It's Dr. Pamela Ravasio. She does multiple things in this space. She's the founder, she's a B leader, she's a keynote speaker, she's an author. We're very honored to have her here today. She works in the luxury textile space and will share more about her background, her area of expertise, and then we will dive into the conversation of what I mentioned before, like the evolution, the actions we can take, and some great examples of successful stakeholders and what they have done in their own work so that we can learn from them and go back into our own worlds and be inspired and try to implement some of these things and just learn how we can better move forward with sustainable practices. So without further ado, welcome, Dr. Pamela. If you would start just saying hello and introducing yourself, and you have such an extensive and area of expertise and knowledge. If you can just start by kind of sharing a little bit about that so we can get to know you.
Sure. So welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great, as Britta just said, even post this event, reach out to us with questions. We're all here to support each other. So I started off over 15 years by now by just having that aha moment, both as a consumer as well as with someone that has family background in the textiles industry, as this just can't go on like that. And I really felt I have that passion of making business, and textile business in particular, thrive, to take care of their people and to take care of the planet, because we can't, as an industry, exist without those things being in sync. So this is where I'm really coming from, and this has sort of been my passion. I've gone through different incarnations of working with different businesses within textiles, from fashion to manufacturers to technical textiles and outdoor. And at this moment, I'm mostly working with senior leaders on precisely getting things done, and really making that progress to make their businesses the best they can be for the future to come. And without further ado, really, right? The question is, well, what does that mean? I mean, 15 years ago, where were we? What has been the difference in that? So I draw up a little bit of where this story of sustainability came from originally. So I have an illustration to share, if we could bring that up. Cool, thank you. So, the sustainability conversation as such is, if you want, going back a long time, and in certain incarnations, you could argue it goes back to Industrial Revolution, because that's the first time that social components started to play a role, because people were scared for their living. But if we're going a bit more to modern times where we are, we suddenly see, well, there's been a speed up of things happening in this space. There have been standards developed, and there have been materials developed that have a much smaller footprint. There, maybe the most important one really was the GOTS, the Global Organic Textile Standard, when it was launched back in 2005. And mind, this is nearly 20 years ago by now. This is a landslide event, if you want to call it that way, because for the first time, people were talking about joining the two sides. So the people that work in textiles, that make textiles, but also going further back to the fields. And as we talk today, suddenly, and you all will have noticed that suddenly the textiles industry is no longer, just fashion and just being cool on during fashion shows and the walkway. But really, the industry has come into the focus also of the legislators in different incarnations, and suddenly what used to be what used to give us a bit of a fuzzy feeling of doing good for others and the planet suddenly has become business relevant. Now, the question is obviously, this is a very complicated conversation and where to start. And I think something like this is always a good start, and it's on purpose a bit complicated. So don't be worried about what you see here. But in essence, what you see is just a textile supply chain with all its inconveniences, loopbacks, circularities that are entailed in it. If you were to go down to really the very beginning of where materials and chemistries and so on come from, through to the consumers. And that already tells us part of the story of why this is such a both emotional topic, a very complicated topic, a topic that raises fears, because this is about a fundamental transformation of how we run business today, as well as we all like what we're doing. We like the products, we like the industries. So this inherent kind of, God, this is going to be looking very different from the way it was before. But this is also the beauty of it. It's something it's never been done before. And like every season is a design that's hopefully never been done before in that particular way. What we're currently trying to do is exactly that. Season over season, finding ways to turn the system a little bit around to make it better, make it more transparent, get more clout on who's contributing, and kind of do the best we can to be good citizens of this world by respecting human rights and by respecting the environment we live in. But I said, it's like, who does what and why, and there is a real business point about doing sustainability. I mentioned legislation just before, and you all, whether you're in the US with the more stringent becoming chemical regulations, or if you're working for big companies that you have to start reporting on what you do or you don't, or whether you're in Europe, where suddenly the legislator in Brussels certainly is making it very tough on many of the businesses. It's not that is a development that started yesterday. It's a development that is a long time coming, and you could argue that's quite an organic development in as far as we do a lot of things voluntarily that over time become the new best practice. And the new best practice, for example, controlling the kind of chemistry that is used in your products, or the amount of waste that is generated, or that you produce and design fashion for a very diverse constitution of consumers. These things become the everyday to a certain extent, until the moment that the legislator says, well, this is no longer something that is voluntarily. We want to make an even play field for everyone, and everyone has to comply with that. So at that point, the cost, if you have to do that in a very short term, the cost becomes rather quite outrageous. So being ahead of that game and really thinking forward, what will come, how can you do better, how can you control better, how can you know how you do things as transparently down to the first step of your supply chain, gives you that head start that when things come along, it's like, well, okay, fine. It's like we're adding a little bit of overhead now, but by and large, it's done. And if I go back 15 years to tie that bracket to the beginning when I started working in this field, is people were looking at me as like, well, why would you want to control that? It's nice for it to be out of sight, out of mind, because that gives us the cost that we can produce for, and the rest is being taken care of by our suppliers. Now, as time has rolled forward, this is increasingly no longer the case, simply because, first of all, your customers, if you have retail customers, they start to hedge their risk. They start to ask questions. that you will have to answer in order to be able to sell. And then the legislator comes around. End consumer have slowly been coming around, but under different angles. They just assume you do a good job by what you do, and they're rather quite outraged when you don't. So this has just been a very organic, natural development, always taking into consideration, and this is again where science comes in, is there's only so much resources we can use until we all run out of that. There's only so much people that we can give an opportunity to in the factories we work with to give them a good life in order to treat them well. So there is that kind of part that is there. Now, the thing always obviously is, there's a lot of aspiration. If you go look around, you will find industry insiders, you have consumers that are massively cynic. And part of that is there's a lot of aspiration, as I said. Sometimes it's just action is lacking. But it's by far not doom and gloom, because if you start to look around, it's really quite interesting, right? In the US, there's Eileen Fisher. She just decided she'd done her job. And she's an extremely good example of exactly that. She's invested 25-ish years of her life to pull off a brand that is really living up to those credentials of doing the best she can by controlling and making sure that her values, her products represent her values, and her business represents her values. There are other businesses in Europe, if you think of Veja, the sneaker brand, that have been built on a completely different business model, even starting with where the material comes from in Brazil, in their case, native rubber. When they started 10 years or more ago, native rubber, with working with rubber tappers, wasn't a thing. It was all sort of industrially cultivated one. They wanted to have organic cotton, again, from marginalized communities in the north of Brazil, because that's where few people went to buy. They wanted to produce in Brazil because, again, few people would produce there, but rather take the material and take it abroad. They wanted to build people around that. And that's what they continue to do also in their native country of France, where their logistics, for instance, for a long time, and still to a good extent, is being done by workshops that work with disabled people, with people with mental health issues, or that have been marginalized in their communities. So just to say, this is by far not just doom and gloom, and there are ethical and well-run businesses. They're genuine business, they're profitable, they walk their way, they have great products, they have very interesting ways of going about and doing their business that are extremely successful. So we're not talking about something that is marginal. It may be harder, but it's not marginal at all in that case.
Could I interject for a second?
Absolutely.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. Last week, we talked with our guest about values and building that into your brand. And a couple of thoughts I was thinking about when you're talking here is, like, Eileen Fisher goes back 25 years. So she had those values 25 years ago, and it took her a long time to get there, but she started at the right place and just kept building it over time. And so one thing I think that's important to kind of understand is you need patience, right? Like, this is not a quick change. You don't flip a switch and everything's like great and sustainable. It's planning and mapping it out for the future, whether you're a very small brand or a company. But if you at least instilling those values and being transparent and looking, that complicated slide that you had, it kind of demonstrates like there is so much to it. But if you can just start off at one point with the values aligned, and then just keep striving for that, it might take several years, but at least you're going in that direction. And like you said, there's hope, and it's not all doom and gloom. You're striving for that. And so I just wanted to make that comment of, start out with doing what you can and just keep plugging away and working at it over time. So,
and I think Eileen Fisher is, in a number of ways, a really good example, because yes, she had her values aligned, but fundamentally she built a business. That what she was all about, and she wasn't willing to compromise on a number of things. But she was building her business a business. And I think whatever business you build, you always instill your own values into that business. And I think that is both the crux as well the opportunity to it, because it means the moment you found your business, the moment you start growing your business, you have to really question yourself as what is that walk that you're both talking and walking, and how would that look like once you're bigger, and what are the trade-offs that you're willing to accept in order to grow, to gain speed, to your point? Or is sometimes 1% better every day better than one day 1,000%, and then for a long time nothing at all anymore? And those that ever have done financial math, 1% every day, if that was your the payback from your bank, you'd be a millionaire in no time.
Right. Yeah. And another thing to your point of there's going to be things that you're going to have to give up, and there might be customers that you lose, or there might be suppliers that you can no longer work with, and then it's maybe a little more expensive. But like you said, deciding what you want to do and building your business around that, and just going for it. And yeah, you may lose some people along the way, or you may have more challenges with other things along the way. But looking at the success of Eileen Fisher, she stuck to it, and look at where she is now.
I mean, and the most costly thing for any brand, not just in fashion, is to be found out as not being authentic. That is the most costly thing that can happen. And going down the path of a Eileen Fisher, of Beja, or if you want to really, if you take the last 3 or 4 years of a Patagonia, the way they started to enshrine their business purpose into the way their setup is, that really, this authenticity goes through the brand, and it vibes. And if people, or if the brand, or the owners of a brand, or designers behind the brand, go against that authenticity that was instilled within the brand from the beginning, customers certainly can smell that on a distance. There is no doubt that you'll be finding out very, very quickly. And actually, that in a sense also brings me to the thing of what were for me the highlights of all those years. And I think one of the biggest shifts that I've observed, certainly in the last 15 years, and most distinctly maybe in the last 5 or 6, is the amount of collaboration that brands, brand owners, people that work for brands are willing to practice, to engage with each other, to learn from each other, to exchange on where they've fallen flat, where they had mistakes, where things didn't work out, to really shortcut each other's journey wherever they can. And actually, one of the biggest projects that has been that, it's really about, and the social agenda of that, which is hugely complicated, as you can imagine, right? It's like there's so many vested interests in, 1, cheap production, 2, in different geographies, 3, there are whole industries that live off the back of kind of accrediting half decent conditions, and they've been doing that for years and years and years and years. So if projects like, I take one example here, Social Labor Convergence Program comes around and brings all those stakeholders into the room and says, like, guys, we're lacking progress, we're lacking impact, we need to change that. And people start to agree on that, and start to open the can of insights they've had in their own supply chains with their own suppliers, and why they do certain things, and why they ask certain things, and why they audit in a certain way, and because of the experience they had in specific geographies, specific suppliers. That suddenly brings a magic to the room of difficult progress, but real progress that can't be turned back. And that for me has been one of the miracles. I mean, there are a number of always those multi-stakeholder initiatives around, right? So if you look at the FLA in the US, is another one of those that when it was created, it was one thing. Today is a much bigger thing that works largely on a similar assumption, is people coming into the room with a similar goal, with a certain aspiration. There are more around, textile exchange being another one. It's like the standards we run today in a lot of our material supply chains would not be possible without people very authentically and very generously sharing their knowledge of how they build supply chains, where they get materials from, who their suppliers are, and so on and so forth, and really sharing that. And that to me is that, so calling it a silver lining is entirely wrong. I would really say that's the diamond, the raw diamond that we have in our industry, to do more of that, to be more open towards each other, to challenge, but also to collaborate. The environment, our planet, our society is not something to bargain for. That's what we're in for, all of us. We all live within that, and we all profit from it. It's the precondition to our existence as designers, as fashion industry, as individual people who we are. We exist because everyone around us exists. We exist because by chance we were born on a planet that just happens to work this way. And by a society that helps us to become successful. And I think it can't be underestimated what that collaboration is possible.
Yeah, I think in the past, it's always been so competitive. And now it's shifted where we do need to collaborate and work together. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
we're going to be in dire straits. And so I love what you're saying to that point. That's, a nice shift that we've seen.
There's a magic to the collaboration. When you go past that initial, no one trusts each other and we're only competing. When you find out that there are areas where it's not even worth competing, there are areas where it's absolutely interesting to compete, and they will keep existing. But in many areas, I would say on best practice in the supply chain, for example, on where can you find geographical areas that have a climate that favors certain materials that are used, and can you work in a better way with those materials and make sure that that geography actually can sustain that quantitative production of the material, be it cotton, be it wool, be it silk, for the long run? And can you make it happen that not only that, but maybe you can improve it even over time? The soil, or the biodiversity in that area, that there is a magic to that collaboration and that collaborative thinking and that mutual challenging. And this is really sort of also where I see this whole, and in my view, that is already kind of a very heartening development, that were started out years ago to think in silos. We had the P&L that needed to grow at a certain rate every year. And then we had a little bit of social issues to deal with, mostly HR, and at what conditions you could or not sack people. And there was a bit of environment, which mostly had to do with waste. And then over time, those came more together. And now we're starting to be at a point where we clearly see that economy exists because there's a society around it that allows it to exist. And that, again, is within the planet Earth, that allows that society to thrive, and hopefully thrive for much longer. And that goes back then to my purpose. Is like, my purpose really is to make sure that business can thrive in that context where everyone's social benefit is guaranteed, and where the environment is one worth living in. And if business can manage to thrive in that, I think that would be so much fun to be a business person, to run a brand, to produce products that are appreciated and are great in every sense of the word. That would be such a headline news for everyone around here.
Yeah, for sure. And something to be so proud of, and your customers will know that, and they'll follow you because of what you're doing. And this is crazy. It's already 2 minutes till 10:30. We could go over a little bit if nobody minds, if you want to stay on and keep chatting with us. Because this is such a deep topic that we could talk way more, much longer about. So we'll just try to watch the clock and finish up, and Was that your last slide on
Yes.
that? Okay.
That's all I have to share on
So I will
images.
ask you, I mean, for now, I'm sure you have so much more you could go into. Could you, is there something you could share with the audience and listeners today that they could do, or a resource that they could go to, a place they could go to try to learn more, or something to make a difference, or what suggestions would you have for
Absolutely.
them to take away?
So it depends a bit, obviously, also how big you are as a brand. So my first thing, though, always is learn as much as you can about the supply chains you have. Really know, not just the first tier, but really know where your material is coming from, where they're being processed, which geography, in an ideal world, which square mile they're coming from. This knowledge is gold. This is your raw diamond to work with. If you need to do something now and want to do something now, start finding that out, map it out. You're at an advantage if you're small because you don't have that many products typically. Flip side being you don't have much clout. So you win some, you lose some. Once you've done that, figure out where you have clout. Which are the things you can change easily? I give you a specific example. If you have still using standard cotton, figure out where you can turn it into organic. If you use virgin polyester, find it recycled. There are, and by now, for nearly every quality of fabric that you need, there is a more responsible option available. And that is my last point. Go to Textile Exchange website, go and have a look at the resources they provide. They have done a lot of the thinking for you.
Yeah.
There are leaflets, there are standards, there are manuals. Use them wisely. Goes back to the collaboration. Do not reinvent a wheel that has been reinvented times and over again.
Yeah. And like you said in the beginning, I was surprised when I first saw your slides of how far back this started, which is encouraging. But I didn't realize, I started working in the industry in the 90s and hadn't heard of, like, at the time, or early 2000s. There was nothing going on in our world about, as a designer, around these sustainable practices or GOTS or any of these regulations that were happening. And so I was, on the one point, it's taken a long time, but it was also encouraging to see, wow, this started way back when, and people cared then, and they've been striving for it. And there are organizations and things being done that, have evolved over time and are looking very hopeful. And Textile Exchange is free, right? You just go on the website and you can access things.
So the majority of not quite everything, but the majority of the, say, reports and the standards to consult, and they have a database of where you can find suppliers that offer fabric, thread, and so on and so forth a specific standard that is publicly available.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And for small businesses, for a very small amount of money, you can become a member and benefit from additional bits and pieces, and the network in particular. So if anyone is near any of their next conferences, to really build network, it's worth it.
Yeah. Excellent. Do we have any questions? And the other thing I'll mention is, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way?
So you find me on LinkedIn. So with my first and last name, there's only one on LinkedIn for the time being.
Yeah. And if you go to my LinkedIn, where the event was, you're connected, you're linked there. So you can just find your profile. And
that's the best way to find me.
Yeah. I appreciate your time. And I wish we could talk longer, because it's such a important topic. And it does get overwhelming because there's a lot of information out there. So I really like what you shared, just kind of the evolution and the history and the good things that are happening. And Textile Exchange, like you mentioned, is a great way, maybe just going there and don't reinvent the wheel. Like you said, you don't have to, you can find good resources there. And so thank you, everyone, for attending today. Feel free, again, if you still have questions and want to message either of us, reach out, please do so. And we hope to see you next week. Thank you again, Dr. Pamela. and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.